Man like Mark Sullivan, the warrior self. Stay tuned for the thrilling episode. Woo!
A positive mental attitude can clear away all obstacles which stand between you and your major purpose in life.
This is the Snowboard Project featuring Mark Sullivan and the Bead. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project.
Welcome back to the Snowboard Project. I'm Mark Sullivan.
And I am the Beeve, and we are in beautiful Ketchum Sun Valley, bringing you another episode of the Snowboard Project.
Yeah, it's November.
Whoa.
Yeah, winter is coming.
It is coming. Did you, now Movember, did you grow a mustache for Movember?
I have not yet. Maybe I should start right now. Is it too late to start?
No, I think it's perfect time for you because it looks like you have a blank canvas right now.
I do have a blank canvas, as a matter of fact, yeah.
So, all right, so who do we have today? We got Mike Bettera. Excuse me, wow. Who do we have today? Mike Bettera?
Bettera, that's right, Bettera.
Is it funny that I always thought it was Patera?
Yeah, it is kind of funny because it wasn't ever Bettera. It was always Bettera.
Okay, so with a B. So tell me a little bit about Mike Bettera and kind of what he's been up to.
Well, Mike Bettera got his start as a snowboard coach at Loon in Waterville in New Hampshire.
Okay.
Ended up working for doing the park program there, then taking over Snow Park Technology, working with them for years.
Yep.
So, and now he has actually gone out on his own to start a business called Effective Edge.
Oh, he's not doing Snow Park this year then? What
well,
happened
Gunny and Jen went to work for Powder Corp, and so they took jobs, kind of changed the role of Snow Park Tech, and so Mike Bettera struck out on his own to do kind of the same things he was doing for Snow Park Tech, but just as his own business called Effective Edge.
All right. Well, that's kind of sick. So should we roll into this episode?
Yeah, let's go into it.
Hello?
Is this Michael Bettera?
This is he, Mark Sullivan.
Oh, damn. Can't pretend to be a collection agency. My voice, I guess, is recognizable or something. How you doing this morning, Mike?
Doing good. Beautiful day here in Lake Tahoe. Could not complain.
Nice.
Going down for you.
Oh, man, I keep really, really busy doing this stuff these days, and I have this vision, and I'm driven now in the same way I was with Snowboard Mag, with Mountain Ops when I was doing that, but kind of with a lot more introspection and reflection and experience. Entrepreneurship has been a great joy and also a great frustration, and so really it's up to you to keep sharp, Let's jump into our interview. I'm here with Mike Bettera, and Mike, I understand actually that you have started a new business. You're now joined the ranks of entrepreneurship. Is that true?
I have, yeah. Not necessarily by choice. A little bit of a push for that to have happened to myself, but I'm quite excited about it right now, and so far it's looking good, But yeah. Some changes happened this winter that caused me to have to make some decisions and determine if I wanted to stay in the game and do what I love or take on something new. And I guess for now at least, I'm sticking in the game.
Cool. Well, I mean, what are the other options? I mean, well, first of all, what's the game you're talking about? What game is that?
Action sports, the terrain park world. Something I got actually kind of into by accident in the beginning as well, but something I found a love for and have been involved in for, about 20 years right now.
20 years you've been working on terrain park. Now, 20 years ago, terrain parks were not as accepted or not as they were kind of a new thing 20 years ago, at least in some places. Is that a fair assessment?
It is more actually, to be more accurate, I think they're going on to close to 30 years, maybe 28 years old. I think something like that. I got into it a little bit later, but still early in the game.
Right. And now you have 20 years of experience, which probably puts you kind of at the front of the pack in terms of seeing the ups and downs and ins and outs of terrain parks.
Yeah, I would think so. And, it's just like yourself, I've been around the terrain parks, all my life. I started in the ski industry in '88 with snowboarding as an instructor down in Connecticut. And, terrain parks were just being kind of conceptualized here in California at that point, I believe. Even, I think, somewhat in Lake Tahoe, over by the dump here in Tahoe City.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're going back to the Tahoe City quarter pipe, that's like 78.
78.
78.
Yeah,
I talked to Terry and Mike Chantry about that. Terry Kidwell and Mike Chantry. And
Mike Chantry, yeah, that's right. He was one of the starters of that whole thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I got to pay respect where respect is due. But I got my start in Connecticut too. Well, I didn't learn to snowboard in Connecticut, but I was like a Powder Ridge local for a number of years, and I recall the ski patrol always destroying our jumps. We would try to like build a jump on the side of the run, and they would basically come by and be like, "Nope, you got to take that thing down," or they would like stomp it out and destroy our jumps, basically before terrain parks, let's say. And that was probably in the that was the 80s and into the early 90s before really there was any kind of real acceptance of terrain parks. And that was actually like a pretty long road to the point today where it's like ubiquitous. Every resort has a terrain park. Even Sun Valley has a terrain park. And there was actually, even when I got here 10 years ago, they didn't really have terrain parks, and so really I think that it's really become something that's been accepted. So how did you like get into doing terrain parks? Like, what was your jump into that from being an instructor and being an athlete as well, if I recall correctly?
Yeah, well, I was a sponsored athlete, started pretty early in the game for snowboarding. And so I was a decent rider, but nothing special. So I kind of realized that early on that, I liked what I was doing. I wanted to kind of differentiate myself, get into a lot of different things and not just be kind of siloed into being a rider. So I started judging competitions. I did it for OBE, for Dan Hirsch, the onboard entertainment series that they did. I did some for the Grand Prix. I did the U.S. Open, working for Mike Chantry early on, and just working events, setting up half pipes as far as skateboard half pipes on snow, the Red Bull ramp or the Vans ramp in the early 90s. And eventually through Stimulon, I started helping out, in the passenger seat of a snowcat, just helping him out with the big air jumps. I was there more for a judge, but he needed additional support. I was the head judge for that series, OBE, but they needed some support on the operation. So I started to kind of get into it that way. None of this was really planned, And when I guess going back to that comment about, in '88 when I started snowboarding as an instructor, there had been features before, but I think in '88 was roughly when they were starting to put stuff on snow at ski resorts more, or maybe 3 to 4 years before that. So
that might be before
what was
that.
The time frame on that?
Yeah, that's like, I bet that people were building jumps at that point, but definitely not into a whole park. Like I would say, as far as I know, the first like kind of run that was a snowboard park was the Outlaw Park at Big Bear. And then there was like a photo shoot for Snowboarder magazine back then and I want to say that was like the early 90s, right around the time I was graduating high school, that was beginning, like the using of a snowcat to actually make a jump instead of knock it down, right? Usually like snowcats prior to that were used for flattening snow and not building it up. you know.
Yeah, and I think they were exactly, the Outlaw Park. I think that might have been John Rice. Southern California. I guess it really kind of just fell into play. Then I started coaching, actually, for Bill Enos, from those endeavors of being a judge and, being a sponsored athlete and, helping with the building of some features. I got into coaching, some of the guys, Danny Garrity, Patrick Moore, Chaz, and them working for Bill at Waterville Valley in New Hampshire for quite a few years. I did that.
And you went to college as well, didn't you?
I did. I was going to Plymouth State College at the time. I think you were over there in Vermont. So there were kind of two crews. There was the Plymouth crew in New Hampshire, and there seemed to be a Burlington, Vermont crew. Mm-hmm. Vermont was ahead of the game with terrain parks at that time. I think Eric Webster at Killington was making some pretty amazing things happen.
They were still pretty rudimentary. I mean, I remember in those early days, like all sorts of sucker jumps where you would just fly off the lip and then overshoot the landing or whatever. There wasn't as much experience with it. I mean, everyone knew kind of what they liked or whatever, but sometimes the drivers weren't riders, and so there was kind of I don't know. I wouldn't consider good parks on the East Coast really until, maybe the mid to late 90s, I'm not sure. I mean, I think there was stuff happening, but maybe not to the level where the jumps really matched up and you wouldn't have to speed check or really control your speed. Like nowadays, it's like all so well designed that you can just take your speed through a whole run versus then you'd have to really speed check and before a jump or try to build speed or milk speed to get it to the landing or whatever. And then there were gaps back then right? The gap jumps where there was a landing and there was a takeoff and if you didn't make the landing, well, you might make a ride in a red sled after that.
No, exactly. Yeah, I think the 90s were really a testing phase. We were kind of figuring out what worked and what didn't work. And, a lot of mistakes were made. A lot of things were broken. But there was also kind of from that, then we go into, 2000 on, we started to refine it. And I think you're nailing it. Yeah, flow started to be a factor. The things were generally less risky out there for the guests and ourselves. It became a little more fun.
Yeah, you started at Waterville, right, with the park program at Waterville, and you ran that for a number of years, didn't you?
I did. I was after Matt Gormley, who was actually there before me, and he got let go. And I remember being the head coach for Waterville, and they had nobody else really to do it. And we were riding it every day. We wanted the stuff to stay good. We wanted the jumps and the rails to still be the quality they were when Matt had been there, and we didn't want anybody else to come in or see the program digress. So I took on both roles, and I was still the head coach, but I was also the train park manager for Waterville. I think that was about 99.
Okay. And so how did you go from Waterville to what was the next step after Waterville, and how long did you do that?
At Waterville, I was always looking to kind of learn more and do more. So I was the train park manager and the head coach there. I eventually realized it was too much to do both. So I got away from coaching, and I went into just terrain parks. And then from there started to take on some more event roles with the resort. And, I did the World Quarter Pipe Championship with yourself and Pat.
Oh yeah. Tell us about that. Tell me about that, because I think that was, pretty amazing, and I'd like to hear it from the guy who put it together. And now that event really has kind of gone by the wayside, I think the first rule was no paper trails, but I guess we're going to create an audio trail right now.
God, it's so odd because right now I'm going around. I'm on the working group for NSA for the freestyle terrain notebook. Everything I do now is so on the risk management side for resorts, pre and post and everything that we're supposed to be doing to help our guests have a pleasant time and a reasonably safe time in the terrain park world. I'm so risk focused right now, and I go around the country actually and do trainings on this stuff. But God, that event was so anti all of what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, but you had to have that experience to understand what liability really looked like, looking it in the eyes,
The eyes of the beast, and that's what that thing was. That was, as a terrain park manager running that event, you'd think it would be kind of cool and fun. You've got this world-class event, all these, Ross Powers, Danny Cass, all of these athletes showing up to your smaller resort in New Hampshire. God, that must be really cool. But for us, it was such a nightmare because of the risk factor. And the risk wasn't the normal kind of risk that, you might think, like a gap jump or a gnarly kind of quarter pipe. It was the amount of alcohol being consumed on hill, fire, almost things being thrown at the athletes, the gauntlet, the urinating on mountain, all of these things that were just, they weren't really even acceptable then, but we were kind of turning a blind eye to it to gain exposure for the resort and our program because we were an underdog and we felt we needed to do that. And so we learned a lot from it. But yeah, I mean, that event would end during the day and there was not much partying for myself or my staff. We literally just passed out after that and didn't even make it to the fun stuff. But,
I mean, it was really crazy. It was basically a quarter pipe, decently crafted, but I mean, it was hand cut, right? And so it was a decent quarter pipe, and it was, as much snow as you could muster into a pile on the East Coast, which actually wasn't bad by the time you were doing it. We started off with not very much snow, and, I'll never forget Ross Powers had just won the gold medal, and I think Ross and Danny Cass were judging, and maybe, I don't know if JJ was there or not, but man, Danny Cass, we have the gauntlet, right, which is like a rope line. I just want to kind of visualize this because it's like, this actually couldn't probably happen today. I think that people are too smart, and people like you have been around long enough to know that wasn't really actually a wise thing to do. And I was young too. I was in my 20s. You were in your 20s, and we looked at that and we were just like, how wild can we be? And so it was pretty wild. And so there was, walk me through the gauntlet and how that came about and what the gauntlet was like. or is that for your current job? Is that like a bad thing to talk about?
No. I mean, we're talking quite some time ago.
Yeah.
The gauntlet. I mean, God, just the, to hit a quarter pipe, you've got to be going pretty fast. And as you're saying, it may not have been the best shape or the best quarter pipe. Towards the end, we did get pretty big. I think we were getting up to almost 28 feet tall quarter pipe there on the East Coast, which was pretty big. And you need quite a bit of speed, and you have to point it. And there's not a lot of speed checking going on there. And I guess the audience that was not necessarily participating or riding determined that they were going to create the path to the rider, the athlete, and that it needed to be a straight shot, and they weren't going to be able to turn, and that we were going to throw full beer cans and involve fire and other obstacles into this straight line towards the quarter pipe. And you didn't really have a way around it. And these are athletes like Scotty Lago, who was much younger at the time, Pat Moore, and then, you had some bigger names, but there was a lot of risk being taken just to hit, to get a hit at that thing. A lot of it too, though, I think our team has to take credit. We made it a little bit intuitive. We knew there was going to be fire and there was going to be debauchery, and we kind of tried to set up that path without you guys knowing it. Hey, we'll put this stair set over here by the side because we don't really care about it, and we know they're probably going to drag it out and burn it, right? Yeah. You guys thought you were crazy, went over there, dragged it out and burned it, and thought you guys were totally breaking the rules and that we were going to be pissed. But, it was kind of part of our plan, laying out things like the blow up doll or putting a car on the hill for you guys to trash, things like that.
The me guy stuff. I mean, I came up with the concept of making an event that embodied that energy of the early U.S. Opens, which essentially was a party. and actually it was the day after the U.S. Open when the U.S. Open was on the East Coast, and so a lot of people would come over from that. But really, the fire, the gauntlet, that stuff was kind of organic and derived. I think Eric Koval might have been the first guy to make the fire, and that just happened. That just happened, and that was not planned, at least by me anyway. I mean, really, it was just let's see what happens. You got good riders, you got a decent quarter pipe. Here's a bunch of beer. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and more planned in the sense that we knew there was going to be a lot of things happening on the mountain that we wouldn't necessarily approve of. So let's put it in the realm of, things that we didn't mind losing on the hill or care so much about. And, and that's what happened for sure. But, it was cool all in all. But towards the end, it just got a little crazy, and it was a little bit too much drinking. People passed out in the woods or on the trail. And, it became less about the fun and too much about the booze,
I would say that, and I didn't go to the ones that were held at Magic Mountain. I guess there were a couple that were held at Magic Mountain, maybe. And I don't think Bridges was involved with these. I think Rome Snowboards might have put it on. I think we just said, hey, no paper trails, right? And you guys can do it if you want to have the party. But really, it's snowboarding is about progression. And unfortunately, maybe that the booze and the snowboarding were so interconnected that in order to up the ante, it was get more drunk, get more wild, get more reckless. And I think that we kind of started hitting the rev limiter pretty quickly, even at Waterville, as far as okay, this is actually going to be a problem here. Someone's really going to get hurt, and it was meant to be good fun. But I think that it kind of got to the point, maybe at a certain point, where it was okay, now this is foolish, right? Someone's really gonna break, something bad is going to happen. And it's funny that right after Ross Powers and Jay the sweep in 2002 at the Olympics, those guys were judging the event, and the fire happened, and Danny Cass thought it would be funny to throw Ross Powers' board in the fire. Right. And so I'm sitting there talking to Ross about 50 feet below the fire. And he's like, wait a minute, that's my board up there. No, hey, you can burn the board, but you can't burn the bindings. And he goes stumbling up the middle of the gauntlet, right, to quickly get his board extracted from the fire. And meanwhile, Scotty Arnold drops in. And you have to ollie the fire, obviously. And right as Ross gets to the fire, he bends down to grab the board, and Scotty goes to ollie the fire and literally almost rides on his head and his back. And I was like, wow, I almost just killed the gold medalist. And it was this crazy thing where I was like, okay, maybe this is at the point where if you're going to, end up killing a gold medalist 2 weeks after he wins a gold medal, maybe we're kind of coming close to that line between clever and stupid,
Yeah, we definitely could have gotten our exposure out of that one. Boston News, that would have been great.
Oh yeah, so that's when I was like, okay, this is going too far. But anyhow, let's not dwell on the World Quarter Pipe Championships too long, because I think that gave us all valuable experience as far as where that line is, where something is fun and where it becomes reckless, and I think that that's kind of the game that you've had to as the jumps have gotten bigger and as the terrain parks have grown, it's really that fine line between reckless and exciting, while trying to always, push that progression, so you left the West, you left the East Coast. Where did you go from there? You were at Waterville, you made the park there, you made a good park there for a number of years.
Well, yeah, going, I guess, it does stem somewhat from the World Quarter Pipes. That event gave us a lot of exposure. We had good parks at Waterville Valley. We had some good parks over at Loon with Steve Ash at the time as well. Mm-hmm. And, it gave us that exposure. And so the resort started to take notice that this was something and that we were being put on the map and people were coming to our resorts and we were gaining some kind of fame in the region for it. And so they started to put more initiative into it and more resources. And about the same time, Chris Gunnarsson, who was, had been doing it out on the California side for years and had really taken a very business approach to terrain parks, he got hired on by our parent company, Booth Creek, to oversee all of the Booth Creek resorts across the country, and Waterville and Loon and actually Cranmore on the east were three of those resorts. And so with that and with the exposure and, all the athletes that had been coming through Waterville, it kind of, I guess it helped my resume and credentials. And when Gunny came on, he realized that they needed to have more organization on the East Coast, and he needed one person to kind of lead the ship for him, overseeing those 3 resorts because it was on the other side of the country in New Hampshire. And so he put me as the lead for all the 3 resorts on the East Coast. So that was kind of a big career bump for myself and helped me. And also eventually I was always looking to take on more, and I took on the events as well. So I also ran outside of snowboard events, ski and snowboard events for Cranmore, Loon, and Waterville. So I just kind of kept taking on as much as possible, right? And that led to me overseeing those programs as well.
So
as
how long did you manage the East Coast resorts for Booth Creek?
I'd say it was probably only 2 years, and then my girl at the time had decided that New Hampshire wasn't necessarily for her, and she was with or without me going to leave to go to California. So I had to make some decisions whether I wanted to, I guess, also up my career, because as we know, the East Coast is great, but terrain parks, things have been happening, long before and leading the charge here on the West Coast for terrain parks. More snow, better conditions, more resources with the bigger ski resorts. And so I made the call to move to Lake Tahoe.
Yep. And I think that makes perfect sense. It's like people don't fly from Colorado to go to, or from Colorado to go to the East Coast. I mean, the destination resorts in America are all in the West, right? Where people fly from all over the world to go ride resorts in Colorado or California or some other places as well. But primarily those two.
So much more money. Yeah, so much more money is being put into the infrastructure in the West Coast for these larger resorts, and then the conditions are just, being a terrain park person, is so much better. We'd get done working for 8 days straight on a park at Loon or Waterville, and it'd been 20 degrees below zero the whole time, and the park's just about to open, and it looks amazing. And then all of a sudden, the day we open it, it rains, just dumps, monsoon style, and then the next day it's back to 10 below zero. And that was the kind of, beating we were taking physically and mentally. And, there's only so much I could handle of that. And coming out here, all of a sudden you realize just the conditions are so much better. You build an amazing park product and it stays around for weeks. It was a world of difference. I also got here too. And, there's giant cranes, and they're building the village at North Star, putting in new lifts, and they're just spending money on entrances to parks, and, 5 times what we were spending on our jib fleets, they were spending here at one resort. So just so much more happening. Right. So it was a good move. And then it put me closer, with Gunny and his team, Josh Chavez, Frank Wells.
Did you start at one resort and then start working with, was it Snow Park Tech happening then, or was this before Snow Park Technology?
No, Snowpark Tech had been, they're around now, I think 22 years.
Oh, okay.
So, this was in around 06, 05, I moved out here. So they were definitely around, but they were doing still their event side of things. But they were also overseeing the resorts because they were owned by Booth Creek, the parent company for all these resorts, North Star, Sierra, Tahoe, even Big Bear at one point, Summit at Snoqualmie, Loon, Waterville, and Cranmore. And, so I got to work with Gunny and Josh on the program overseeing all of the resorts, which became my passion just over time. Mm-hmm. So that's what I started to do when I was over here. I'm still managing it for the East Coast, but also now working with some of the bigger resorts and getting to dabble into that world.
So basically you expanded your portfolio of resorts that you were managing terrain parks and terrain park programs for.
Correct. And then I got to get involved a little bit with Aspen and the X Games and some cool new projects, working on the Burton B or the Forum photo shoots with Brian Knox. A lot of, bigger projects than we'd seen on the East Coast.
Okay. So, what was like the thing that like really got you excited? I mean, terrain parks, there's a lot of different aspects of it. There's rails, there's driving the snowcat, there's dealing with the risk management, and also just the overall design of the parks. I mean, what part really connected with you as far as like, you know, that's the thing that like kept you in this terrain park game for so long?
Well, I think it really came down to the people for me. I really enjoy the terrain park staff, both the operators and the day staff, you know, out there, man against nature, you know, working on the hill, trying to make these projects happen, working crazy hours. I mean, I've done multiple days that have been over, they're not days when they go into over 30 hours, but just, you know, working hard. You create a bond with these people. You're working to accomplish, you know, some big goals with some big challenges. And you become very close to them, and you meet people who are your friends for the rest of your life. I mean, just as with snowboarding as well, and, you know, yourself and I, or Bridges, a lot of the people I've met are, you know, I'm still friends with to this day. But we had that kind of bond within the terrain park world that we were really, you know, fighting to make things happen. And that was pretty cool for me, you know. So I really like that part of it.
Right. And it seems like, you know, you're kind of like the gateway to progression. You know, I mean, really the terrain parks are really accessible today, and people can really learn and progress in the sport very rapidly with terrain parks. And really you've had a huge role in seeing these athletes, or not even athletes, but just recreational riders kind of improve in their riding, you know, and you've had this big impact on basically everyone who goes to those resorts. You know, I think that's kind of a unique role in that the rubber is really hitting the road at the terrain parks, you know, in the terrain park level. So
I guess I would
go ahead.
I feel differently about that in a way.
Okay.
I feel like to some extent we failed the guest, and we failed ourselves in our industry, and we're seeing a lot of the terrain parks budgets and things being pulled back or cut back, or half pipes removed. You know, I mean, multiple resorts removed their half pipes last winter season alone. And so
Hey folks, if you're tuning in to us still, please take a minute to go to Patreon.
Wait.
What?
Is there like some question that they wouldn't still be tuning in?
Well, if they're still listening, they can go to patreon.com/the-snowboard-project.
But you're still staying still.
Still.
Like, they
They might
not
have
have
just
even
listened
made
to
it
the
this
first
far.
5 minutes. Yeah, they
Okay.
might not have made it this far. So.
Okay.
But I just want, if you're still listening, okay, if you're listening, go to patreon.com/the-snowboard-project, and we're going to count on you guys to support an independent voice in snowboarding media. It's how we're going to keep this thing advertising free and have a voice that is not affected by the advertisers.
hey, buddy.
Hey, you dropped there. Let's get back into that, because that is really interesting. Because I was just saying about how, you know, I thought that like you know, you've been on the forefront of the progression of the sport, and not just for the pros, but for the recreational participants. And then you're like, actually, that's not right. Exactly. Go ahead.
Well, I think to some extent we tried. You know, we worked with Burton and Jeff Baliba, who's done amazing things. I mean, I love all the products that, you know, Burton's trying to do to push, you know, the entry into the sport and retain people, from the Riglet program, the Burton Progression Park, and even the Stash. You know, the Stash wasn't supposed to be about really big riding. It was more about fun adventure and everybody staying together. You know, you being able to ride with your family through the Stash Park, or with your friend who's not as good, or your wife or your girlfriend or your kids, you know, and everybody could have a good time in there because it was something for everybody. It was an adventure and experience. And you got to choose your own adventure through there. So there were some cool things being done, for sure, but not enough, right? I think we were quick to progress the features and what we were doing to a level that they became very difficult to ride. I mean, we were putting out rails that were 20-degree, kinked rails, or, you know, jumps 65 feet, you know, 4-pack of jumps, all this stuff that was just big, and there wasn't a lot of people riding them. Only the people that kind of came up with us over a longer period of time. And the new entry level people getting in the game today, have much less to offer. We see this with a lot of the kind of data that SBT has collected, that we started to do feature counts and figure out, if a resort had so many features, how many of them were large, how many were medium, how many were small, and how many were extra small. And we'd find that the small and extra small was such a small percentage of what they had out there, and it really wasn't helping the growth of the industry. And we've been trying to change that for years now, and people are talking about it, but it doesn't seem to be changing. I mean, things like cross courses or family cross courses or fun, just, offset rollers and things like that. There's just not enough of them. And,
yeah,
I think a lot of.
And it also, by the way, it seems like it takes an inordinate amount of resources. It's like one massive jump. Like, I look at the Mammoth Parkline. Granted, Mammoth has like a ton of amazing riders, right? So they do have people hitting those jumps, but it's like, it's that defying to straight shoot down at 35 miles an hour and launch over an 80-foot gap, It's like, for a guy like me, it's not very recreational, But the resources that go into making one jump, right? You could build almost like a whole small park, or maybe a couple of small parks, perhaps. I don't know. You would know better than me, but it takes a lot more resources to make one massive feature than a lot of small features. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, resources, and then the skill set to build the jump and to have the right takeoff and landing angle. And, sometimes you've got to be winching those landings. Just the time to push that snow, and even the time to make that snow. Maybe not in Mammoth cases, but in other resort cases, they have to make the snow first too. You can do so much more with it, but also look at the time, right? The resort opens at 9 a.m., closes at 3:30. I mean, when is that jump getting hit, right? And the other factors too, you get a small breeze and that jump might get shut down, the larger jump, right?
Yep.
But the riders and the athletes that are coming out there, we call them the 1%, which I think that 1% might even be shrinking, that are there. They may only be hitting that feature for 2 hours out of the day, 2 to 3, maybe 3 on the higher side, right? But if smaller features, fun stuff for everybody, fun stuff too that maybe, somebody can just simply roll over, but somebody else can gap the rollovers. I think it's, up the ante as far as creativity, whereas that 4-pack of large jumps is just not creative. It's not progressive. And you could do so much more and push your limits, if you wanted to build something that was fun for everybody, right?
Right. It seems like the big jump sets, those are almost for the marketing of the resort and not for the fun of the riders. And in that, like, you're riding up the lift at Mammoth and you're like, whoa, there goes, whoever, right? There's pro riders riding that, and you feel like that, guilt by association or something of being on the same hill, the same day, the same time with like some of the most famous riders in the world, but by the same token, it's like to get to the point where you're actually going to hit those jumps, it takes years and years to get to that point versus like it. I mean, I don't hit those jumps anymore, but I love the medium park at Mammoth. I love that thing. And so I'll sit on the lift and be entertained by these guys shooting the moon and then go over to the medium park and disappear on that side of the mountain. But that's not, the big jumps are always by the lifts. It seems like, so they show it. It's more about showing off almost or whatever than actually taking that thing forward. So what you're saying is, though, there's almost been like a misallocation of resources, or more for the marketing of the sport, maybe than for like the actual entertainment of the people who are paying over $100 for every lift ticket. In some cases, almost $200 now for lift tickets.
Well, and these people, the resorts, they survey and they do a lot of research on their guests, and people are going a lot less than they used to go. Then when you and I were kids, they were going, 10, 12 times a season on average. You and I, of course, were going, and a lot of the people that we were involved with were going a lot more than that. But on average, people are going about, 10 to 12 times. Now they're going about 6. Well, think about it. How much less are you going to be on your game if you're going 50%? Only half as much as people before. And there's a lot more new people getting involved in the sport, and they're not familiar. In Terrain Park, it really has become a bad name. It's scary. It's intimidating. There's a bunch of jibs in there. There's a bunch of features in there I'm going to get hurt on. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to get yelled at with my kid because I'm standing somewhere I'm supposed to not be standing. I don't know where the hell I'm supposed to be standing anyway because nobody's showing me what I'm supposed to be doing. it's, another analogy is you go into, I moved to Tahoe, I got into dirt biking, and I go into the local dirt bike shop, and I was treated like a kook. And I'm like, hey, I'm in here to spend some money, to learn, to get into the sport, my girl and I, and eventually maybe my family, and we're going to support the sport, right? But here we are with terrain parks, and we're trying to make it so people don't go in them, right? And when they do go in there, if they're not who we like, then we're going to kick them out, and we just want it to be about us and our friends. But you know what? The less that product gets used, I mean, if ski school is not getting used, do you think they're going to keep ski school around as skis? Or if nobody's signing up for a lesson, well, let's keep hiring instructors. Let's keep putting money into the ski school zone in the building and the kids programs. No, they're going to stop doing it, right? Well, the train park, if people stop using the train park, all that cat time, all that fuel, all that labor, all that snowmaking, it's going to go away. And I think our industry, the people leading it, really don't see that. If you're selling pizza, you're going to start, and you're moving a certain cheese pizza is selling and pizza with anchovy is not selling. Are you going to keep making anchovy pizza?
Yeah, no doubt. And it just like case in point, like half pipes, right? How many 14-foot half pipes were there in the country in like the year 2000?
Yeah, I don't know that number off the top of my head, but I agree with you. I get where you're going, and I agree with you.
And then like the 18-foot half pipe came in, and that was actually, there was still a lot of half pipes then. And then we elevated to 21 feet or something like that is like the current state of the art in half pipe, or quote unquote state of the art. I listed, we call it a 22, and I 22. Think there's even the Super Plus now that's taller than that they have out there, but not how many people are aware of that, but that just came out about 2 years ago. Okay, so looking at the super pipe, the Super Plus pipe, and by the way, I feel a little guilty. I didn't know it was 22 feet off the top of my head, but I'll tell you what, man, riding that half pipe is intimidating, right? And you have to carry so much speed just to make it to the lip. You are charging, and you have to be locked on that edge, and there is no speed checks and whatever just to get to the lip. Whereas like an 18-foot pipe, a 14-foot pipe, you could mess around and still catch a few feet of air or whatever. And now it's like a full-on commitment. And what we've seen as, this evolution of half pipes has happened is like, yes, the riding, the athletes go bigger, and now they're capable of doing more tricks. But you know what? It's so much more inaccessible to the average rider. And honestly, I could see that actually being eventually the death of half pipe altogether, because it's like, where are you going to go learn how to ride half pipe if you can only learn how to ride in a 22, and like, when are you going to get the fundamental skills or just that excitement about half pipe riding if you can't like kind of break into it in a easier way? Because it really is kind of intimidating, I think, for the average rider to go into the half pipe. And then you get all that like social kind of thing where it's like, oh, I don't want to look like a kook, so I'm not going to go drop in and only go halfway up the wall if you're just beginning in the half pipe. And so where is that gateway to that, like, to the 2032 Olympic champion or whatever? How does that guy get into the sport?
No, absolutely. I mean, and not a new conversation, right? But let's take a look at it from more of the operational standpoint, right? The side that, more, I guess, what we're talking about today, you and I, how much more snow, right? So it takes more snow to make the 22-foot pipe, even with the earthwork, right? So that takes more time, right? So you're adding days to the snowmaking process. Then there's the build time for the 22-foot half pipe. How many more days does it take to push the snow there? So cat time, right? So it takes more days, right? So you've added more days for snowmaking, more days for the build. Now the thing finally opens, right? So you've kind of closed down the window of the time of that feature being open. On average, you're looking about roughly 22 weeks in the season the resort is open, and you start, that's not a lot of time if you start to think about it, that we're open, and we're starting to, whittle away or take away at the time this product is going to be open for the guest. And then even more importantly, as you're just saying, we're cutting back, the percentage of people that can use it. I mean, I feel a 22-foot pipe is nice because anybody can go into it because the walls are more forgiving because it's wide open. But God, the resources alone, the resort's going to question why they do it. It makes sense for a couple to do it, right?
Yeah.
They should. It's going to differentiate them, set themselves apart. They're going to be a big dog. They can host competitions in there, and even more now because there's less half pipes out there to offer. Or, Seven Springs, it's a great opportunity for them. They're the only one on the east. that's
Right.
a huge story for them, and that's pretty cool, and they get to do a lot of rad events. But for everybody to do one, it just doesn't make sense. And then to your point, well, and how many people get to involve themselves, experience it, and then even train in it? And that cuts back on it. And you know what? Another thing too, to add to it, is the operator skill set and even the equipment needed to do it. So the equipment costs more money, and then you need to hold on to skilled operators, and not many people enjoy maintaining and building half pipes. It's kind of
It's tedious.
it's not a lot of fun sitting behind. Yeah, tedious.
It's slow.
Right? So
right?
now you're losing the skill set, right? So if you have the resources and the want and the desire to do one in your resort, well, you may not even be able to find the skill set to maintain it throughout the season. So, you know, where does that leave you, right?
Yeah, and like even like okay, like take it for instance, Sun Valley. They invested in a 22-foot pipe. I don't know, they don't do one now. A couple years ago they had one, but it's like just the way the sun hit it. One wall was soft, one wall was ice, and it was like, you know, just the where it is on the slope. It is so hard to get all the factors to line up to have like a perfect pipe, you know, and maybe that's part of the reason too that like. You know, just it's really hard to have a half pipe for a resort. And yet it's also one of the most watched events on television because it's easy to watch, right? Because it's like all right there in front of you versus like a slope style where it's like, you know, I was at the Olympics and it's like there's this full stadium there. And literally they're watching a TV screen until the person shoots off the last jump and is in the air. Then they can actually see the athlete land the last jump. Right? They don't even see any of the run aside from that last jump if you're in the stadium. And it was kind of like they're watching this huge jumbotron, and it's like, okay, well, that's why half pipe is cool because you can watch the whole thing. But, you know, I guess though that go ahead. I'm sorry. What were you going to add to that?
Well, you know what's interesting is, you know, both free skiing and snowboarding in the Olympics, it's over 50% of the viewership, what they're watching for, you know, downhill skiing, et cetera, all that. GS, slalom, the mass majority of people, you know, the big dollars and what they're watching snowboarding and they're watching the free skiing, right? Yep. However, they say the crossover, right? The people that watch GS or slalom for downhill skiing, they actually ski, they actually participate. They're saying that the people that actually watch snowboarding, very few of them actually participate in that sport. So they like to watch it, they enjoy it. Yeah. But they're not participating. They're not going to the mountain and doing it. And that's the miss for us, right? That's where we're losing out. And we're losing out because less people are going to the train parks because they find it intimidating.
Right. So it's like there needs to be kind of a new model that's created almost that's like, okay, how do we get these people into it? Because I've actually worked in television at the Olympics since 2002, and I always saw it as like an opportunity to grow the sport. That's why I got behind the Olympics. And I sided with Terrier for a little while there in the very beginning, but then I'm like, well, if 14 million people, now 25 million people are watching one broadcast, that's like 6 times the amount of people that actually snowboard. So it's like, if we can actually translate that into people doing the sport, then more of my friends will have jobs. There'll be more careers and more accessibility to, you know, pursuing snowboarding, you know, for me anyway. And so
I agree with you.
And so then the question is, what are the steps that you can take from having someone watching it, this huge audience, massive audience is watching it. How do you get them to actually go snowboarding?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things gone wrong there. I mean, it's not even just the terrain park that's building things too aspirational or cutting off our market, right? I think it's our entire industry, from both the media and the actual the product that's being pushed out there. It's not necessarily, we're not focused enough on the beginner and making it entry level for them, like easy to get into, from the price points. And that's even on the resort side. Yeah. You know, hey, season's pass prices. I think that resort I used to pay for in Connecticut, you know, and go ride back in 88, it was close to $500 for a season's pass. Now you can I'm buying one locally for all the Tahoe resorts, for that same price. I mean, that's pretty insane, right? Yeah. However, you think about how many more times I was going and using that pass back then versus the person from San Francisco who's using that Tahoe pass, right? If they're using it 6 times, then maybe, yeah, they're getting a little bit of a break on the lift ticket, daily lift ticket price of roughly, $120, $130, but not much, right?
Right.
I guess just the story even we're telling, we're just not making it, any of the Olympics and any of that stuff, does that look easy to get into? Skateboarding, they make that look easy to get into, right? You see the Street League course. These courses, you can be a decent skateboarder or not even so, and you could roll around and have fun there. But is that the same for the course at the Olympics or the X Games? Not really.
It's all based on that super kicker model, right? You were saying like at the resorts, it's like those 80-foot jumps. While they're impressive to watch, they're inaccessible, and really to muster the courage to shoot one of those for the first time, that's a big ask for a lot of people.
Yeah, but you and I, we look at Holy Bowly and we say, wow, all right, what Crush is doing over there, that's amazing. Everybody that sees photos of that's like, oh yeah, I'd love to just slash that thing right up it. Or maybe a gap over the, like my level. I can make that thing work within my skill set, right? No matter what your skill set is. And I think that's the difference, Jeff Regis from Red Bull pointed out something interesting to me, and he said, works for Red Bull and they're looking at growing participation, because it helps their beverages, consumption, whatnot. But,
okay.
Skateboarding and basketball, right? Basketball and skateboarding, two of the easier sports for people to get into. Why? Because it's not, you don't go to a skate park and it doesn't cost money to, and the equipment doesn't cost much to get into, and the same with a basketball court. And they're located everywhere throughout, right? Yeah. So anybody can go and find one and enter the sport. That's the kind of stuff, that's probably why companies like Nike, that industry is being supported so much more, and they have kind of the capital and the money to be involved in the game. And you and I and our friends, we thought that there was going to be this extreme growth, and we were going to be able to, everybody was going to be involved in it and make money and have a great time. And now we're looking at a lot of it's being cut back and being shrunk.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So, here's something that like this is a question that I have no idea what the answer is, and you might have an answer for me, which is like, it seems like the manufacturers, the hard good side of the industry, and the resorts don't really talk very much with each other. Like there isn't like, there isn't any collusion to grow the sport between the two.
No, I think there's very limited. Although I will say with Burton, there has been, and what Jeff has pushed there, even with the Stash, the Riglet parks, all of that, and the product, the rental programs, they do a really good job, right? But not everybody else, and not even on the ski side, and I know you and I are more specific to snowboarding. That's our passion I love, but there's no company out there doing what Burton's doing. And, everybody's always saying, God, why doesn't a ski company do what Burton's doing? Yes, they've written the model. They've already done it. Why isn't somebody else doing that to help the sport? But you're right. We're not involved as much as we should be, the two together, to help grow the sport. We're each complaining about the other, but we're not helping each other.
Right. So what kind of steps could the industry take to get it back on a growth model instead of a shrinking model? Like, I think that you learn from your mistakes. So what mistakes have we made that we can learn from as a sport?
Well, I don't know if many people agree with this, but I see, like, if I'm going to go, I went to the Trans World Snow Conference, and I picked up on, wow, I'm hanging out with all my friends. We're in the industry, and so, we all are, pushing for what's next in the industry and where the sport's going. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, I got my AK camo pants on and my black AK puffy jacket. And I'm looking at the guy next to me, who works for Trans World or Burton. He's got the same shit on, right? Mm-hmm. We're like, not only are we building jumps for our buddies and our friends and our close-knit group, but we're building, we're manufacturing clothes and boards and everything else for each other. And I don't pay for the AK camo pants or the jacket. Somebody gave that to me, but what are we pushing out really what the guest is looking for or what we just think's cool for each other? And that's hand in hand with the terrain parks as well, right? And the super bikes, we want, as Josh Alveo always say, who I worked with at SPT, sometimes we're building parks just so we can have somebody buy us a beer and get a slap on the back at the bar that night, right?
Yeah.
From the locals versus, the family from San Francisco that's putting all the resources, time, and money into being there, and are really going to be what, helps us bring the terrain park to the next level, or helps our resources, we're yelling at them when they're in the terrain park during the day, calling them kooks.
Yeah, it's funny because I know you've probably been to these. I know you've been to these things, like the consumer trade shows, like in Boston or Chicago or whatever. Maybe the marketing directors from our industry should make sure that they go to all of those consumer trade shows to actually look in the eyes, like the people who are going to go and consume that product, right? Because you're absolutely right. It's like we do as an industry, like try to cater to the high end and then use this marketing model of like, well, people will think it's cool, so they'll aspire to be like that. But I think that maybe that the sport has progressed so far that it's like, that's just unattainable now. You can't really look at Shaun White's riding and be like, I'm going to be that guy one day. I'm going to learn those tricks. I mean, it's just like the gap has grown so far. When we started, it was like you would watch a snowboard video and literally that Saturday you would go try those tricks. And I don't think that really happens anymore.
No, I would agree, unless maybe, and this is the gap, or bridging the gap, is things like that, Holy Bowly, getting to see somebody cruise through that, right? Why don't you, and it comes down to the courses too for events. I mean, Holy Bowly is a contest, but it's not like, the X Games or the Dew Tour or the Grand Prix. That stuff is just, it's so far out of reach for anybody, for myself and for most of my friends, as well. And I think the media too, I was talking more about the products, like say, that we're making, but I think the media too. I mean, what story are we telling? And it's always about the aspirational. And I get it. We need the aspirational. We need to tell the big cool story, but what's the right mix of telling that story? Right. And what's too much? And I think all of us have gone too far in that world on telling what we think is cool story and not how to get people into it and make them have fun and enjoy it like we did when we first got into it, right?
Oh, hey guys, Beeve here with Sullivan, and we're talking about Patreon. I know, it's one of those things that we gotta throw in there, but check this out. It's because of people like you that go and get on the internet and go to Patreon and support us for as little as what, $2 a month?
Yeah.
It's people like you that help us do this.
But people are like, no, it's free. It's a free podcast,
right?
Steve. We don't need to pay for this. We can get it for free.
Yeah, I know.
The way that we're going to tell these independent stories is by having people support us. Right now, we got about 108 people supporting us. Not a lot.
108?
108.
Still pretty rad.
It is pretty rad, yeah.
There's 108 people out there that are supporting us on Patreon.
Yeah.
Right on.
With your support, as little as $2 a month, we can continue to push this ball downfield to continue to tell these real stories in snowboarding.
A case in point, like look at border cross. Like border cross gets the same ratings as half pipe, right? And you know what? Like you could literally have the best border cross team in the world as a snowboard hard goods brand for like $20,000 a year. Because there just isn't any money in the sponsorship of border cross riders. And yet that's like the most attainable competition aspect of snowboarding in the Olympics. Right? People can run through a border cross course. They don't necessarily, if you have mandatory huge jumps, okay, then you're setting a high bar, but it's like people can relate to going around a bank turn and getting to the bottom first and all that kind of stuff. Right? That is actually something that can connect with an average consumer. And yet there is no backing of that from like the hardcore part of the industry.
No, well, it's not cool. We don't enjoy it. We don't enjoy building it, right? A family cross course. There's a line out the door. That thing gets more usage than any of the other features that we're spending so much money on. Cross course, family cross course specifically, a small one, very limited maintenance and build time in that thing, right? You don't even need to really back up in it when you're maintaining it with the cat. You're just gonna roll through that thing, do a little bit of blade work, and that thing's open, right? You're gonna hang up some fencing, make it look cool, and everybody can go through there and have fun, right?
I love
whether
those
you're a
things
really
with
good
my
athlete
kids.
or just a family.
I love those things with my kids. I take my kids through it every time.
Yeah, the one at Sun Valley, they do a great job.
Yeah. And then you could take it to another level where like, okay, let's put timing on this, right? And then you could time yourself and know how fast you were every time and try to build your own progression that way. Right. But anyhow, it's like snowboard cross. It's so accessible to everybody. And yet the industry ignores it. Right. I mean, think about how much money is put into like these riders who are hitting these big jumps that very few people can hit versus like a guy like Nate Holland, who's like won like, I don't know, like every X Games for years. Right. And he has a hard time getting a sponsor. You know, and it's like, why is that? I mean, that is where the rubber hits the road for the average person. Why isn't the industry recognizing that?
I think you're right. I mean, even on the terrain park side, we pushed a resort back east to do a family cross course. It took years. They finally put it, and now they're just like, there's no way. You know, I had another project that I thought would be even more for the guests, and I'm like, hey, let's do this. They're like, there's no fucking way removing that family cross course. Too many people are using it. It's lined up nonstop. So we love it, you know. And so it took years to get them to do it, and it's frustrating, right? These are the things that are going to help our sport, but they're just so hard to get people to push. We don't find them fun or cool, and it just makes it difficult.
It seems like there's a lot of closed-mindedness going in snowboarding. For being such a creative and open thing, at least in the beginning, it seems like there's a lot of closed minds these days as far as just like being open to try different things and see what works and what doesn't work and then learn from those mistakes. But maybe if the resort industry talked to the manufacturing side of the industry, they would develop more products for beginners. They would, you know, promote that side of the sport more, the side what people actually can participate in, and not just the part that they're, you know, that is like, oh, one day you too could be like Shaun White. Well, you know what? The part they maybe aspire to be like Shaun White is like, you know, just something beyond the actual riding, where it's the lifestyle they're after, or the chewing gum. I don't know. But they're aspiring to not to actually walk a mile in his shoes, but they're aspiring maybe to the trappings of fame and success, and not the actual, like, the act of doing it.
No, we're lacking in a lot of, well, I guess I would say Effective Edge and Snowpark Tech, we're never lacking in, you know, great ideas, new cool products, right? I mean, we've got so many that we try to push on these resorts. We've been trying for the past 6 years, and some of them, I'll give you one that we were pushing 6 years ago, an amazing idea, and you talked about it. Why not time the family cross course? Well, why not build an app where you get to track each other's times, and then you can put yourself up against, say, your kid who may not be there that week at Sun Valley or, you know, whatever, North Star. And you get to track your time and post on social media. And then you get to go against Nate, right? Oh, what's Nate's time in that cross course, right?
Strava
or, you
whatever.
know, so everybody, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So everybody can have fun. You can post it. It has technology tied to it. Your social media tied to it. It's groundbreaking, right? 6 years ago, nobody wants to do it.
Well, we got a lot to learn as a sport, I would say. Still, we got a long way to go. But honestly, you know, the media has gone in such a narrow direction as far as promoting the aspirational aspect. That's why I decided to start this podcast to begin with, because these conversations don't actually happen like openly, like where the public actually hears it and they can actually contribute to the sport and contribute to these ideas and then really progress the sport in different directions, you know, and that's really the purpose of this whole thing. And like, look, I'm so blown away by this conversation we're having here, Mike. It's like, when was the last time that like the media like published these kinds of ideas? You know, when do they talk about border cross being actually a relevant thing? And is it, you know, I guess I got to have a question here, which is like, does the how can the resorts and the parks and how can they, you know, connect better, right, with the actual participants? Like, what kind of things? And obviously the timed idea is a great one, you know? Well,
all right, and you and I are talking, we keep saying cross course, right? Family cross course. All right, family cross course, it's a little different way of saying it, making it cool. But why not just name it something else? Why not actually add some other products into it? Why not add some juice boxes, right? Some just big, wide, flat boxes that are in this family cross course that you go through, and all of a sudden there's jibs in it as well, or this things that are, entry level that people can enjoy and hit, right? And have fun on. So, all right, cross course. Well, let's tweak it. It doesn't need to be a cross course, right? And that's the thing. I think there's such narrow-minded thinking sometimes that people are just like, oh, I don't want to do a cross course. It's lame. It's boring. That's not cool. Well, okay. Let's put a tweak on it. Do something different. Call it something different. Add to it. Animate it differently, right? Put different features in it put a quarter pipe in it or, a mini half pipe wall in it. Do something different. That's the thing. And people are afraid to do that. And I mentioned this to you the other day. When we were younger, I guess, in our terrain park days, we'd talk about how we couldn't wait for the GMs of that time to go away and for the younger people to start taking over the industry, the gray hairs to retire. So then we could bring in our new cool ideas and everything that they were holding us back on, and we could start to implement them. And we just take it to a whole nother level and blow this thing up. And now a lot of us, are there. We're the people, the next in line, or we're in line, or we are running the resorts. We are operations managers, we are general managers, but we're not thinking outside the box like we promised ourselves we would do. We're going back to the norm. We're staying within our box and our framework, and we're not expanding outside of it. And it's so frustrating to see. There's not been a lot of grapevine and breakthrough in terrain parks, features, design, things like that in years. I feel 10 years. I feel like the Streets is coming on. God, it's got to be 10 years, almost 10 years old now, right? And the Streets was pretty groundbreaking. The Stash was pretty groundbreaking. Yep. Holy Bowly, that's something, but not a lot of people are doing that in there, because it's tough to maintain.
It is really tough to
but
make.
Let's figure out a way. But find a way to do it then, right? Like you could still kind of make it happen. There's got to. Everybody's always like, it can't happen. I'm so sick of it. We can't do that. And this is now the people that in the back in the day were like figuring out any which way to make something happen. Whether it took 30 hours straight to work or, design this jib that's never been done before. Not a lot of that happening anymore.
Yeah, it's like the sport got so fixed on being cool that it forgot about fun. Right? It's like cool trumps. I won't use the word Trump. Cool is like higher up than fun, and then really it's about the cool factor. What do they think about me? Do they think I'm cool? Do they think I'm, And it's not about just having a good time with your friends. And when we didn't have terrain parks, we didn't have any of this stuff. It was just really you didn't have the choice to be cool. You just went out and did it because it was fun. And that's why we're still here today, is because we got hooked on snowboarding, not because it made us cool. In fact, it made us the opposite, right? People made fun of me. I went to high school, I had skiers all around me, and I was like the only snowboarder. I wasn't cool. I was actually the opposite of cool to them, right? And yet I had fun doing it, and that's what mattered, Yeah,
well, we're riding some beat up hip on the side of a run that was 4 to 6 feet tall, and nothing really intimidating, and making it go down on it and just having hours of fun lapping that thing. I mean, that's what it was about. But a lot of those features just aren't there. But, the guests just changed too, right? Mm-hmm. They're not they're not willing to, I guess cut their teeth as much or, pay to play or, give up some, cause some pain to make it happen. And we need to realize that, that double kinked rail is not something that they're going to use, and they're not going to step up to like we would spend hours on just trying to make it happen. They're just not going to do it. They want it given to them. And rather than complaining about that, let's find a way to give it to them. Let's make it intuitive. Let's make it easy. Let's make it fun for everybody. Because if we don't, then they're only going to do what they are doing now, and they're going to start taking our resources away.
Yeah. And I think that's actually probably a good place to leave it, because, I think it's up to us to make it happen for snowboarding again, because I think that it's kind of gotten so fixed in its ideas that we've kind of lost track of the things that are really going to help the sport grow again, Yeah.
We're too busy listening to the loudest voice, and that's not always the family and the one that's up there spending the money for vacation. It's the local that buys the pass, and he's in the park all day long, or her, and we're listening to them, but they're not the majority.
No.
And that's almost the first part, is we got to start listening to actually the people that are looking to enter into the sport and stay, hopefully stay with it. And not the people that are already secured in it.
Yeah. Amen. Cool.
That's
We're right on,
interesting.
Mike. I'm gonna get going here because, like I said, I could just keep spouting these ideas. But look at me learning. Look at you learning. This is going to be a valuable podcast for the sport, I think. I hope.
Yeah. No, I'm stoked. Well,
Cool.
Thanks, Mark. You have a great rest of your day. And I think
Oh.
On behalf of Mark Sullivan and the Beeve, thanks for listening to the Snowboard Project. Remember, ride fast, take chances, dream big, and take action. And for God's sake, don't forget to support advertising-free snowboarding media at patreon.com. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project.